Okay, so here we are using ngSwitch and ngSwitch case to render different content based on the question type. Right? We're rendering one div versus another div. Ideally, what we would do is that instead of this quiz taker component hosting all the UI, ideally these would be components themselves, right? The content for the true/false can get fairly complex, or the multiple choice can be fairly complex. It would need to iterate over all the choices. Probably needs its own controller, right? So its own components. Right? So instead of having all this content here, ideally we would have dedicated components for each one of these. Right? So let's take a look at how we would do this. Let's first create all these components. Right? We'll create a true/false question component. We'll create a fill-in-the-blanks question component, a choice component, an essay component. Let's create all those 4 components. So let's head over to the client side. This is webdev Angular. Let's see where we are. Git branch. So let's create it. So we'll do an ng generate component, and we'll create a true/false question component. Okay, we'll generate that. We'll generate another one. We'll generate, what are the other ones? Fill in the blanks, so fill blanks question. What else do we have? We have multiple choice, so multiple choice question. And finally, we'll do the essay question. Make sense? All right? Okay, awesome. So we've created those 4 components. We can now go back here and instead of these just being plain old divs, right? They could actually be those components we just created. Right? So instead of this having this content, let's remove this content. Let's not have any of this content. Instead, let's render. Let's replace these placeholder divs with the components we just generated, right? And we just have to replace these divs with the components, right? I think they're called. So for true/false would be true/false. There it is, true/false question component. We just replace that. This will be fill in the blanks question. This will be choice, multiple choice. There it is. And here we have the essay question. See that? All right. Now if we go back, notice that it renders as we would expect. It renders with the default placeholder text that is added as a boilerplate content. Right? We have essay question works and fill blanks question works. See that? Which is pretty much what we expect. We can change that a little bit. We can see all these questions here. Where are they? There's essay questions. There's fill in the blanks question, and so we can change the content of this HTML, right? Instead of being just essay question works, this could be what we had earlier. So this was it H4? I forget. This is essay question. There it is, essay question. There, see that? So we can now modify it, and it can have its own little component, right? Its own event handler, its own validation. So as we interact with it, it might highlight certain things, right? It can deal with its own data and state. Okay. But ideally, we could move a lot of the what we are rendering in here, like the question title, the description, the type. Well, the type we don't really care. We would like to maybe instead of displaying the question title here, maybe we want to display inside of the question, right? Or we could decide to leave it out here. All the things that are in common, just leave it outside. Everything that's common to all questions, right? But then in each one of these, then have specific UIs for this. So for instance, for the true false, we might render here maybe two radio buttons that will allow us to select whether the question is true or false. Right? So maybe this could be label, and this could be an input of type radio, so type radio, and this can say true, and then or false, right? And maybe we do a BR here. Actually, we don't have a true false. Let's do essay. The essay that looks easy, right? Let's go back to the essay. In the essay HTML, we might render perhaps a text area, right? And this would be a class form control. There, so we have the question, we have the description, and then the text area for what we want to display there. What about fill in the blanks? Well, that's a little harder, right? Right, we would need to parse out the values and generate the input fields, right? So we'll do that in a bit, right? But if we submit the answers, how would we get a hold of all this data? How would we get a hold of the data that the user is actually submitting, right? Somehow, we would need to bind the values of whatever we store in this text area. Somehow, we need to bind it to the quiz, right, that we are submitting for, right? So we have all the questions, we have all the choices. Well, what choice did you choose, right? Or what did you provide for the essay, right? For the open-ended text. So how do we bind that? Because notice that the data now lives here and down in the components, right, as opposed to the parent. The parent had the question object, right, that was iterating over. And somehow that question needs to be passed onto us down here in each one of these components. We need a reference to it, to be able to say, hey, this is the choice I'm choosing. It's true. It's false. This is the essay response that I'm selecting. So, these are the blanks that I'm filling in. I need to be able to bind those values. So let's see how we can do that. All right, let's do that.